Hello. On behalf of the UK Government's UK Trade and Investment Departments and Pure London, welcome to this special panel discussion discussing the very best of British fashion and accessories. My name is Ian McGarrigle. I am the chairman of the World Retail Congress, and it's my pleasure to be able to chair this discussion here today, looking at what makes British fashion unique and outstanding for international retailers and their customers. Now, this panel has been brought together by UKTI as part of their ongoing commitment to promote the great British companies and the very best of British brands in the fashion and accessories market, and working with Pure London to deliver just that. And so to help me discuss that and what makes British fashion so outstanding on the international platform, I'm joined by three great retail experts and fashion experts, and starting on my left with Derek Lovelock, who is currently acting CEO for Mamas and Papas, but has many years' experience, most recently as chairman of the Aurora Group, which has a number of leading British fashion brands in its portfolio. Katie Sturch, who is a senior editor looking after the trade shows for WGSN, which is an international fashion trend forecasting service. And Andrew Jennings, who is an outstanding retail expert, having worked right around the world, which I think was why Andrew is going to be particularly pertinent for the discussion here today. Andrew has been CEO for many leading department stores around the world, from Saks, Harrods, House of Fraser, Karstadt, Holt Renfrew, and others, and is currently on the board of Ted Baker as non-exec director and advises a number of retailers all over the world. So welcome to you all. And really, to start us off on this topic about great British fashion, just be really interested to start off in getting each of your views on why it is you think that British fashion is outstanding, and if so, what it is. I mean, Katie, I don't know if you want to kick us off.
Absolutely. I mean, British fashion for me is very distinctive. We have, I would like to say that we pride ourselves in being the trend leaders across the global industry. So you only have to really look at the British fashion retail landscape to see that. And it's about kind of always being innovative, and I think globally people look to us to provide that information. We have a great heritage behind our retail landscape and kind of our need and want for trend. We have customers that are kind of constantly challenging retailers to offer that newness. You only need to look back at kind of the 60s and kind of Carnaby Street and Mary Quant and Beaver, and those are the people that really established kind of trend, innovation, and kind of the start point of retailers having to react to that. Obviously, kind of nowadays we're thinking about online and the mass effects of online that we've had, and how retailers really have to quickly react as well, and the way that customers are shopping globally. But ultimately, I think we are the trend leaders, and we also have the flip side of that, where heritage really comes into play from our history of manufacturing and the great British brands that we have, and really kind of that British price. That British mark and that tag of best of British and made in Britain, that we are hopefully trying to rejuvenate as we rebuild on kind of getting people to look back at manufacturing.
Yeah. Andrew, what would you say British fashion stands for?
I'm not trying to add too much more. I think I've summed it up perfectly. I've always found that in overseas countries, people think of British fashion as cool Britannia. You know, what's different, what's innovative. They're looking to the Brits. You know, Britain was, and London was, the capital of the fashion world for many years. Then it went off pitch. Now it's back again, and you know, there's been some great brands that have been re-established. Brands like Burberry, which was sort of risen from the ashes, and have been hugely successful. And there are many examples, and a lot of newness and innovation. And I think that's what the customer is looking for today. But when people think about British brands, they think of quality, they think of a distinctive look and feel, and they feel sort of, there's a safeness about British brands.
Yeah. Derek?
I think that's exactly it. In the UK, we just cover the spectrum from, as you say, our heritage in producing fine fabrics, skills in tailoring, in pattern cutting, so that whole area of tailoring which we really owned for many years and are now rediscovering. And then at the other end, as Kate says, you can look back. I was actually there in those times of swinging London. Ever since then, I think at the other end of the spectrum, we have been innovators in young fashion, street fashion, teen fashion, call it whatever you will, that the world has always looked to. People come here just to see the latest innovation. We are very innovative, but it's in both of those areas, so there is just such an immense choice.
Just can I ask, what is it that you think we're particularly known for? Because the international fashion world is so competitive, and you think of Paris fashion week, you think of Milan, you think of New York, and there's huge designer brands coming out of those markets as well. I mean, where do we sit and fit within that?
I think the UK, be it retailers or the manufacturers, have always invested in young design talent. I think we produce and we nurture young designers. More importantly, we take chances with them. And so I think it is that young, innovative, slightly, often very edgy design that really starts everything off.
Absolutely, I agree with that. If you look at kind of London is always the hot spot, the talking point, in effect, of the big four catwalks when we come around seasonally. Because we do back those young designers, perhaps sometimes slightly offbeat, more edgy designers, but it's about bringing that innovation to the floor, and that comes very much from our history and our textile history and our kind of almost rag trade when you come through to kind of the more commercial end. But it's about kind of really sort of having that movement and that traction, and that is what people want from us globally. They want to look to us, they want to be able to adopt and adapt trends globally kind of from that sense, I think.
I think building on this, when I was working in North America, we would look at, and a few years ago, the Milans and the Parises and the New Yorks are highly important, and the UK was not as important. It would be sort of, well, shall we miss this out? And many buyers would say that. Now, in the last 4 or 5 years, it's really been, well, we've got to go to London. London has now been regenerated, rejuvenated, and I think that's critically important. So it's the buyers who are the ones that are going to bring in the merchandise across the globe.
Yeah. It's interesting you've touched on designers. I mean, what's actually happened in the UK with our design? Is it as strong now as it's ever been, or is it even stronger? I mean, what's actually happened? Is it, because Derek, you touched on it as well, about our young designers are quite an important part of the success story of British fashion.
There is a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to support the young designers and to bridge that gap between pure talent, raw talent, and commerciality. A lot of investment, a lot of people's time, and I think that bears fruit. They are able to grow, so that talent is able to come out into a commercial world.
Yeah.
If you look at someone like Christopher Bailey, where he came from and where he is now, I mean, he was a young designer who came into fashion school, and he went into Burberry as the chief designer, and now is the chief executive of a billion and whatever it is size organization. Huge credit to the institute, and I think the fashion schools do a phenomenal job here, and the people who work within the fashion schools.
An important point, I guess, is these designers aren't just gravitating to the big brands. I mean, they're being employed by sort of mainstream high street but mass market retailers right through the whole spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. So that the heritage that is taught from kind of a design school, we have some of the strongest design schools in the globe, and having that sort of flexibility for people to go out into the industry. I think what will be interesting is we've been hearing kind of conversations about British manufacturing and trying to rejuvenate that over the more recent years, is that actually there is this shift towards trying to get more vocation out of kind of in roles, and backing by the government one thing that I see when I go around and look at brands kind of more at trade shows and while I've looked at retail kind of globally, and even kind of just while I'm off, as you know, in places like Sheffield, where I'm from, is there's this real kind of want from students and young design brands to be able to capitalise on our history of manufacturing and perhaps work in new hybrid ways and be clever, because they don't strictly have the access there at the moment, to kind of really think about kind of moving forward in that way. And I think that's really exciting if we back that as the economy needs to.
Yeah. Derek, I know you're no longer involved with Aurora, but you were for a number of years, and just be interested to hear a bit more about that. I mean, how important was the international side to the collection of brands within Aurora, and kind of just maybe could you talk about the challenges of building that international side of the business?
International growth has always been important. This is a finite market in the UK. Most of us have brands that are relatively mature, so to be able to grow internationally was the route to growth. Fortunately, our brands were very early into that, and because they were distinctive brands, they had that ability to travel. Markets, different brands appeal to different markets. I think that's part of going back to what does the UK have. I think it understands how to build brands that are unique, that have a distinctive identity. So Caramel, of which I think, I'm not sure of the latest numbers, but I think about 60% of global sales are outside of the UK. And transported, we would always say in any major city in the Northern Hemisphere, there would be enough customers that if you put it right, you could open a store. But in particular, Russia, whilst a challenging market at the time, was absolutely tailor-made for Caramel. And Oasis, with its more feminine style and approach, more print, was perfect for the Middle East. Interestingly, harder to sell in the Netherlands and Denmark, where the sort of floral print, that sort of appeal, didn't quite have. So initially, it was that ability to have a niche, but to identify which markets would really be receptive to that niche. So that was the opportunity and also the challenge.
And were you conscious that Britishness was a part of what you were selling?
No, I don't. Our brands weren't selling quintessentially Britishness. So no, it was our skill at creating brands that had a unique DNA, had a point of view. I think that's what we were experiencing. And I think also brands that had a unique understanding and a consistency for their customer.
Yeah. So, Andrew, turning to you now, I mentioned in the introduction, you've worked for and led a number of department stores around the world, and just so be fascinated to hear from your experience how, as a Brit in operating those markets, were you surprised at how British brands were perceived, and particularly how the buyers that you worked with, how did they perceive the part of British brands within the buying mix?
Look, I think number one, it goes down to the customer. It's what does the customer think about all of this? And just as an example, when I was in Germany, everybody said, well, only German brands work in Germany. And I think that it is a fallacy. And we launched about 18 months ago a British promotion, which we got huge support from British vendors, called Feel London. And we brought about 80 British brands into the marketplace. And the results were incredibly favourable. The customers reacted unbelievably well. And I know we're talking about fashion here, but just very traditional British cushions with a Union Jack on were sell-off, within an 80% sell-off in the first couple of days. And so the German customer likes British brands. And why do they like them? And we asked them, we did a survey, what did you think about these things? They like the uniqueness, they like the quality, and they thought they were value for money. At obviously a good, better, and best price point. And I also found a similar reaction in each of the countries. And I'm now involved with a business in Australia as an advisor. And again, we've introduced some brands in this last year. And again, the Australian customer And it's not just bricks and mortar stores. We know that many British retailers and British brands on their e-commerce site are doing huge volume outside the UK with British goods. So it reaches all countries of the world. So in summary on that, if you've got the right product and its quality, its reliability, its value for money, if I look at a brand like Primark, for example, it has been unbelievably successful. Again, a great British brand that's out there.
Yeah. So it's interesting in Germany with Karstadt, you pulled it together as a British promotion, so there's a real
Feel London
benefit to pushing and promoting that too. So it's interesting, yeah. But can I ask because the purpose of this UKTI initiative is to encourage British brands, British businesses to go international. I wonder what sort of lessons you sort of took away from, what was it like dealing with and buying from British brands? Are there any issues that you feel that is worth kind of highlighting for British companies selling internationally?
I think that, again, you've got to look at what price can you sell those goods for in that marketplace. You can't say, well, this is the exchange rate that Derek would know extremely well. And, what is going to be value for money for the customer? And if you don't get the right price point, then it's not obviously going to work. So, number one, make sure the pricing is right. And, again, many people won't test these brands, and you have to test them. Yep. And I'm sure Derek would be able to give a good insight into that.
Yes. Well, yes, because that's, again, sorry, go back to Aurora, you operated concessions, so it's, you've got a feel for working with host stores. I mean, what was your take on how you built that business, and what did you learn from the relationship you needed to have with those host stores and the buyers and therefore their customers?
Twofold, really. Especially by going with host stores, you get that exposure to the customers and to a lot of customers. I think it's always something we always knew is you have to adapt to a certain extent to the local market tastes and customers. You have to be aware of it, customers. And it's keeping that balance between the brand essence and brand DNA and the adaptation and how to do that adaptation in an appropriate way. And I think that is very important. And that's what we learn from the exposure to the customer, that feedback. Andrew's absolutely quite right. You have to listen to the customer. You're exporting a brand, but it must be cognizant of local tastes.
It's quite interesting, in the South African marketplace, it was somewhat of a sort of a closed market. And there are so many British brands that have gone down to South Africa now and have been so well met by the consumer. And again, it's differentiation. I think that's another key factor. What do you have that's different?
Yeah. And we've also touched on value, Andrew, you mentioned that. I mean, how important is that? Because we've seen, you mentioned Primark as well. I mean, I think part of the reputation of British retail, British fashion retail is the value sector that we're doing seemingly so well in. I mean, how is that playing internationally, do you think? And is there an appeal there that's...
Unbelievable, again, if you've got the right formula, and Primark, when they came into Germany, they had lineups, not just in the first couple of weeks, but after 10 weeks. In fact, in a small city like Essen, 700,000 population, the fire department closed the store down after the 6th Saturday because there were too many people in the store. That says something.
Ultimately, just to touch on value, I think really that's where we're winning. And as we've said, and it's the ASOSs, the Primarks that are really driving that and driving that kind of newness at low cost. That's a whole different ball game compared to where we're talking about kind of heritage and perhaps like the contrast between the tag of that made in Britain. That's not to say though that quality can't be made within the boundaries of each of those retailers themselves across the whole different level of markets. you know, we've got people like Topshop who are sort of capitalising on that idea of made in Britain, and they have something that's similar to their premium boutique kind of ranges. There's no reason why kind of the more value chains can't bring that in, and are also succeeding from a British point of view, but internationally. It's the effect, I think, as well of online and the way that the customer is shopping, because they are more savvy. It's more about researching. They're kind of they know what they want. They know how they want to wear it. It's about how kind of reactive these retailers can be. And I think that really we lead from that point of view from British retail and brands.
I think that's right. I mean, it is such a competitive marketplace with a Primark that has changed set the bar significantly lower in terms of price. But I think that innovation and the energy that's in British retail means that all of the fashion retailers, the other retailers, have reacted in terms of finding ways to create product, manufacture product, fabric that reacts to the new norm on pricing and what the customer is demanding.
And I think you've got to look at price points at the opening price point, at the better price point, and at the best price point.
So just also want to look at how do you build a brand internationally, and Derek you said that going international for a British company is pretty essential these days because it's a finite market here, but again equally it's not an easy thing to do. There's a whole range of things, but thinking about building the brand and the marketing, I guess, what do you think see as the essential things that you would advise a company thinking about whether they can create a noise and a brand internationally?
It's a combination. In a multi-channel world, it's a combination of a little bit of everything and lots of varying skills. Bricks and mortar are still essential in some form. It can be using somebody else's bricks and mortar, but probably in terms of a brand, somewhere, a store that is experiential. That's where the brand really expresses itself the best, supported by all of the other available channels, and that consistency across them all. And marketing these days, from when it was, is now so varied, from social media to celebrity endorsement to bloggers. Expertise in so many in those areas, which I think everybody now is beginning to realise that they have to attract those skills over here and then use them to go global. But it is a skill in lots and lots of areas.
Yeah. So Andrew, were your buyers in whether it's in South Africa or Germany, how did they start to hear and feel that noise about a brand that was something they should look at? Was it?
Well, number one, WGSN, and trade magazines and online. I mean, it's just the world is so small today. Everybody knows about everything. Many years ago, you'd look at Women's Wear Daily on a sort of frequent basis, and that's where you'd pick up a lot of trends. But today, it's online. What's hot, what's different, and also communication, travel is a lot more extensive, and everybody is everywhere in conferences, and so they've got to have their ears and eyes close to the market.
I think just to follow on that, it's narrative really at the core of everything. I think the best British brands and the way to move kind of internationally is having a really strong narrative, because the customer is so savvy now and kind of finds the information before you can even offer it to them. They know what they want, they know what they're looking for, they know how to wear it, they want that kind of communication. So the millennials that we're seeing, they want to be able to kind of have their input felt from businesses and brands, and for brands to react. And there is no reason now why you can't kind of even test international markets via online without going in blindfolded or jumping in with both feet. And you can kind of carefully think about curation and having that niche and really capitalising on your narrative. That's the most important thing. Bricks and mortar, absolutely, because you need to have the availability for people, some customers to want to shop, to feel fabrics and see items. But it's online is where brands really need to kind of build out and test and trial things.
Well, we have to draw this to a conclusion now, but just wanted as a final question, be interested in your thoughts to help wrap the discussion up and leave some key points. Is if you were talking to an international buyer about looking at British brands, what is it you would sort of single out or say to them about why you definitely should look at British fashion and accessory brands? I don't know who would like to start.
Because
Katie.
we lead with innovation. We lead from a trend point of view, and because we have the ability to do it at low cost, at high cost, because we can work across markets, and we're quite clever in because of our history and our heritage, that we have now young people and young brands that are able to offer that internationally.
Yeah, building on that, I think there's really exciting things happening, not only in the women's wear, but also in the menswear world.
Absolutely,
where,
yeah.
as I say, going back to tailoring, manufacturing, fabric, that's a growing trend, and I think that's really exciting on the one hand. I think on the other, in a world of increasing retail globalization, standing out and being differentiated is absolutely key. If you shop any of the mega malls in the Middle East, where there is just so much choice, then real innovation and differentiation has to be the answer, and there is more of that here than anywhere else in the world, I would say.
I think there's one other word that I'd use, and that's relevance. And I think today you've got to be relevant for your customer on an international basis. And so many of the British brands are very relevant to the customer. It's the customer who makes the decision whether you're going to be successful or not. And it's that relevance that comes down to, and when I look at so many of the new brands that have come out in the last 2 or 3 years, the majority of them have been successful because they're relevant.
Well, thank you very much to you, to Derek, Katie and Andrew. On behalf of UKTI and Pure London, thanks for your contribution. I hope you agree that it's been a really informative and useful discussion on 2 levels. If you are a UK brand thinking about going international, hopefully everything you've heard in this discussion will encourage you. There's an exciting international market out there that is keen and really excited by British brands. And if you're an international buyer thinking about British brands, there's huge variety, uniqueness and heritage that is on offer here in the UK. And we very much hope to see you in the UK at Pure London and other trade shows. And if you need any more information, please do contact UK Trade and Investment. Thank you for watching.